Welcome to Startup Shop Talk, the live show, office hours edition, where I answer your questions on everything from everything startup, from idea all the way to product market fit. I'm answering questions that you guys have submitted in advance. Feel free to ask questions down in the chat as well. And hopefully we'll have time to get to those as well. So let's actually get to it. Today we're talking about marketing your startup as well as a few other things. So let's dive in. So first question was from a startup founder that I talked to last week, and then again this week, and they said they had this really great product, but they weren't sure how to market it. And this is something that I get all the time, people talking about. So let's break it down. So the idea here behind marketing is that you have a really solid understanding of your customer, and you know what they like, you know what messages resonate with them, and so you try to get in a message in front of them to resonate, to get them to create, to get some action, to influence a change in behavior to your benefit, right? Okay, so let's take it by analogy, right? So if you're, let's say a Toyota or something like that, and you're manufacturing a new car, you know who buys cars. So you have all this data at your disposal, and you can look for gaps, right? So you know exactly who's the type of person who buys a hatchback, exactly who's the type of person who wants the satellite radio, if that's still a thing in cars, people who want the navigation system, people who want all-wheel drive, people who want four-wheel drive, people who want rear-wheel drive, people who want electric versus gas versus hybrid, right? You have all this data on exactly who buys what. And so you can look for gaps and say, okay, well, based on our understanding of people, we know that there is a certain segment that there's this overlap here, and we can offer a new product in that space because we think that there's interest, because you have all this data. And then once you get it out there, you know exactly who these people are and where they shop because you have all this data. So you can say, all right, well, if I'm, throwing a new Toyota kind of family minivan type thing here, maybe People Magazine and people.com is like a great place to advertise, because I know that these people read that magazine. Fantastic, right? But putting an ad for that minivan in The Economist might not be the right approach, right? Because that's just not where the customer is. The problem is that when you're in a startup, you don't have any of that data, right? We're missing all of that information. So instead of doing this process of product development, where you bring a product to market, you know exactly who it is, and then try to get a message that we already have reason to believe will resonate with them in front of them, we have to actually co-create our startup with that customer. So we have to develop a product along with developing the customer relationship. And the search for that is a search we call product market fit, right? That's why it's product market fit, is it's two sides, because you don't have enough data to know that there's a solid market. We don't have enough data to say this is exactly who's going to buy this kind of product. So the problem is that marketing in the traditional sense doesn't work. And that's why this particular startup was talking about how they had tried like a marketing firm, it didn't work. They ran ads on YouTube, it didn't work. And that's because marketing is the wrong approach, right? So this relates to another question that I got asked as well. So Nat asked me on LinkedIn, like, how do you get your idea and experiment in front of customers? And that's a fantastic question. And it's perfect for startups, because the idea here is that you have something that's interesting to you, right? You think that there might be something out there for this, and you want to get it in front of customers. So how do you do that? And so this is the startup version of marketing, is that we're going to get some experiment in front of a customer. So let's talk about how you do that, right? It's basically like a 5-step process, if you will. So the first one, and it's the most important one in anything design thinking, is you have to understand your customer. First thing first, you have to understand your customer. So that means going out and talking to them, going out and finding where they are, going out and understanding what are they buying now, what are they doing now, how are they experiencing this problem, are they experiencing this problem, how many of these people are out there, getting this really detailed understanding of exactly who this customer is. And once you have that, second step is that you can try to figure out where they are. Right? So we don't know, are they reading People Magazine? Are they reading The Economist? Are they reading something else, right? Are they listening to this particular podcast? Is an influencer really important to them? Are they really active on YouTube? Are they really active on Instagram? Are these people who are just watching TikTok videos, right? Where are all these people hanging out? Where do they shop? All that stuff. Literally, where are they? And so now you have an understanding of who they are and where they are. Great. Now we take all those places where the customers are, and we find the most efficient way of getting in front of them. Efficiency is two things. So one, it's challenge. So how hard is it to access them on that channel? So for example, if you wanted to get on an influencer, because these people are really into this particular set of influencers. If I can get on one of those influencers, I'm going to get right in front of this audience. Well, unless you have a prior relationship with them, that's probably pretty hard. And if you're coming out with no product and kind of know we're going to have traction, it's probably going to be impossible to get access to that influencer. So the challenge level is really high. Right? So that's number one. The second measure of efficiency is the actual impact, or in this case, the size of the audience. So how many of them are there? So you want to find the place where the customer hangs out, where there are tons of them out there, and it's not too hard to get onto that channel to reach them, right? So that's the measure of efficiency. So you understand the customer, you know where they are. We found what we think is the most efficient channel to reach them. This is where you run your experiment. You go out to that channel and drop some type of experiment. This could look like a lot of different things based on your stage. It just could be, trying to see if the problem resonates. It could just be doing customer interviews. It could be doing, a landing page test or a paid advertisement of some kind. There's a lot of variables here, but you're doing some experiment on there where you have a clear pass or fail, right? So you know exactly what success looks like, and then you run that experiment. And the fifth step is to get that data back in and say, okay, do we pivot or persevere, right? The classic startup language is, what does this mean? Right. So if we were able to get some results back on this, if people were resonating with this and our experiment was a success, what does that mean? But if we weren't, right, if we missed the mark on that, what does that mean? It doesn't mean our startup is sunk. It doesn't even mean the channel was wrong, but we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be wrong about that? And then you just iterate and go through that process. What does being wrong about that tell us about the customer? What does that tell us about where they are? What does that tell us about efficiency? Right? And then you go back through and do this again. And you go through the whole process and you just iterate continuously until you get traction. So that's how you market a startup, quote unquote, but that's how you get your idea in front of customers. That process that I just described also, by the way, is growth hacking. So one example of this that I really like is that when Airbnb, when they wanted to get their early product in front of as many people as possible, they had listings. Right? They were able to get relationships with the people who wanted to list their houses because it's B2B, it's a smaller number of people, right, than the people who stay at houses. So they had these people like, well, how do we get the other audience? And they said, you know what? Where everybody's looking right now for places to rent is on Craigslist. So what they did is they said, okay, that's a channel. How hard would it be to get on Craigslist? So they, instead of doing anything manual, they established this little API endpoint, right, that would automatically post from Airbnb to Craigslist, so that as their users listed their rooms or their flats or whatever on Airbnb, they would automatically get on Craigslist and automatically get in front of that audience when somebody clicked to rent and go back through to Airbnb. So they're able to really get in front of that audience really, really fast. So that's how that works. Okay. All right. Fantastic question. So speaking of marketing, so June had asked me, like, what is how is a business brand different than a business name? And so I would say that this is a quick question. Or a quick answer rather. The business name is part of your business brand, but it's actually a lot more than that. So when somebody says brand out loud, we tend to think of like, okay, the name, the logo, the colors, right? Stuff like that. Like that's your brand. And that's a part of your brand. But if you stop there, you're probably doing yourself a disservice, particularly if you're in a service business, because a brand also encapsulates other things like experience and personality. So your brand has a particular personality associated with it, has a particular experience. Are you fun? Are you serious? Are you conservative, right? Are you eccentric, right? Like, are you funny? Or like, there's so much that goes into like what your brand is. And it's really important to understand like how exactly is our brand going to be, how do we want it at least to be experienced by customers? So I would say that like if you want to think about brand, think about it as this all-encompassing concept that has to do with yes, your name, yes, your logo, yes, your colors, fonts, typography and all that other stuff. But all of that should be influenced by this experience that you're trying to create with your customers. So think about your brand that way, and everything else will kind of fall into place from there. Okay, cool. So another question, and we're going to kind of pivot here, was, so this is kind of my summary of a longer question that he asked, but it was, I believe in my idea. I know I need a team. I can't get a team because a team takes money and I don't have money. So what do I do next? Right? And it's a really common question. So we get this all the time in like really early stage entrepreneurship. So I'm, for example, an organizer here in Sacramento of our 1 Million Cups chapter. So it's this front porch to the startup ecosystem event every Wednesday, 9 a.m. on Zoom. We all, hop together and we hear 2 presentations from startup founders for 6 minutes, followed by 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A from an audience with appeals. From their peers. It's a fantastic event sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation, like 160 chapters in North America. Anyway, really great event. But when you at that event, we often get some presentations from really early people, or we get people in the audience who are just starting out and they have this idea and they're kind of working on it, but they don't have all the skills, because who does have all the skills, right? We need a team. And they're like, I don't know what the next step is, like in this thing, because how do I get a team? The thing that they're kind of getting at here is am I fundable? Right? So I know I need money. I don't have a product, so I can't sell, right? There's only so many ways you can get money, right? Like you can either sell something, you can borrow money, you can steal money, right? You can print money if you're the government. You can, there's only so many ways to get money. And the last one, of course, for startups is that you can trade equity for cash, right? So that's another way that you can get money as well. There's only so many ways to get money, and they're like, okay, so I'm a startup, so I'm supposed to get this equity, which means I need to be fundable, and I have a feeling I'm not fundable yet, or maybe I'm not. So I want to spend a quick moment talking about what it means to be fundable. So a fundable startup is one that has what Alex Blumberg calls a credible theory of hugeness. Credible theory of hugeness, 3 words, break it down, verse order. So hugeness, meaning a startup in order to get equity investment has to have the potential for a really outsized return, a really, really big return, right? Exits in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, of course, unicorns in the billions, right? We have these potential for really, really sizable exits. So you have to have this idea that what this thing I'm working on can be really, really big. Otherwise, it's not very interesting to an investor. So that's number 1. So credible theory of hugeness, that's hugeness. Theory. So you have to have a theory of how you're going to get there, right? So you're not big now and you say you can get big. You have to have a path that you can draw from here to there to get to hugeness, right? So you have to have this theory of how you're going to get there, like what's your go-to-market, how you're going to develop this, the team, the money, right? There's all this kind of stuff that you're going to just chain together and say, if we do all this stuff correctly, amazing, we'll be huge, right? So you have to have a theory of how you're going to get there. But the third one is the most important part. That theory has to be credible. The theory of how you're getting huge has to be credible. So what credibility means is you have to evidence, right? And that's either going to be in the form of traction. So you have real customers paying for it. You're going to have some early data in the form of that, right? Or you're going to have quite a resume, right? Like you've had 2 successful exits in the past, right? So that we can kind of believe in you and believe in your team, but you have to have evidence behind this thing. Ideas aren't evidence. So just with an idea, you're not fundable. So what do, right? You have to find a way to get traction. And this goes right back to that idea of marketing that we were talking about before. What you need to do is get in front of customers, understand who they are, find what problem they're solving, understand their fears, their wants, their pains, their jobs to be done, the needs that they have. Just develop all this big, robust understanding of the pain that the customer's feeling, and that there are enough customers out there. And then once you have that validated, right, using that exact same process we talked about a moment ago, then you go through the process of doing the same thing, but for the solution that you think is right. And then you start getting resonance on that, and you can run experiments to try to build up on those things on top of each other. And then eventually you're starting to get more and more traction in the marketplace. And that traction is that evidence. The traction is that credibility. So that's kind of the big picture here is what do you do next? What you do next is get in front of customers. The direct answer to your question is to get in front of customers. And that kind of leads us to our last question of the day. And if you're watching live and you have a question, drop it in the chat so I have a chance to get to it. But our last question of the day is, what do I do once I get a potential customer on the phone for interview? So Jason is asking me this because he's doing some early stage customer interviews. And so he's getting them on the phone or on Zoom or similar. And the idea is to extract information for them so that he can do some early testing to understand is the problem resonating with them, maybe even the solution a little bit resonating with them. So like, what do I do once I get them on the phone? And what you do when you get a customer on the phone is you try to elicit data from them. But the problem is that you cannot ask them directly a lot of what you want to know. You can't ask, would you buy this? You can't ask, are you interested in my idea? Because you're going to get junk data back. We call this the mom test. So let me rewind a second and tell you about it. So if you go to a restaurant and you have this like thoroughly mediocre meal, so it's not bad, but certainly not good, it's thoroughly mediocre. And at the end, the waiter, the waitress, they come up to the table and they say, so how was everything? What do you say? You almost certainly say it was good, right? And it wasn't, but we say it was good. And we say that to a waiter that unless we're in a really nice restaurant, we know that waiter probably doesn't care. He doesn't care, but we still don't want to hurt his feelings. We still don't want to engage in conflict. So we just say it was good because why, right? So we do that even though we know the stakes are really low. When you're talking to a customer, the stakes are really high. They know that this is something you care about. They know this is something that you're passionate about, and they don't want to let you down, which means they're gonna massage over things, they're gonna omit things, they're gonna sugarcoat. You don't want any of that because it's all polluting your data. So what you want to do is you want to ask a question such that even your own mother would have no choice but to tell you the truth. Right? The mom test. So you can't go up to mom and say, hey, mom, do you like my startup idea? Because then she's going to go, oh, yes, honey, it's brilliant. I love it. You're going to be so successful, right? You're not getting any really reasonable data. But what you can ask is, hey, mom, tell me about a time when. Hey, mom, when was the last time how did that make you feel? Right? You can ask those questions and she's going to tell you the truth because you haven't put any stakes on the line. All you've done is say, tell me about your experience. So when you're talking to customers, you're trying to get out stories. You're trying to get about what happened in the past. So, tell me about a time when whatever the problem is, right? And how did that make you feel, right? How did you go about trying to solve that problem? How did that work out for you? Why do you think that didn't work? Right? You're asking them all those questions because you're getting all this really valuable data about their experience, about what they're doing, without jeopardizing it with bad information. And this is really hard to do, not because it's complicated. It's not. It's very simple. It's because it's really vulnerable. So startup founders have this tendency to say, I want to do a survey, right? Because a survey feels safe. It's impersonal. All I have to do is put it out there and people will answer questions. But the problem with a survey is that you can only ask kind of closed-ended questions or just hope people take the time to fill out the form correctly. And you certainly can't ask any follow-up. And most importantly, you can't see their eyes light up. So when you talk about like, oh, was that painful? Did that hurt? Like, oh, yes. Oh my goodness. Like, right? You never see that kind of reaction in them because they're just filling out something on a form. So it's very, very weak data that you get from that. And it's very heavily biased, but it's also safer for us. But entrepreneurship is not about safety, right? Entrepreneurship is about getting out there and being vulnerable and taking a risk because the rewards can be really, really outsized. Okay. So that is the end of the questions that I wanted to answer today. So thanks so much for joining us. So I'm going to be right back here at 10 a.m. next Thursday. That's the 14th at 10 a.m. If you want to submit a question in advance, as some of these awesome people did, you can hit up this link. It's also available in the description of the video. And you can either type a question or you can actually record a video asking the question. And if you record a video asking the question, I might actually play it on here before we do that. So keep that in mind. And with that having been said, thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.